Folks, just so you know, we're going to start at 1:15. We're just giving people a few more minutes to get here, but we also want to respect your time since you were here on time. So if you want coffee or something, go get it, and we'll start at 1:15.
All right, can we, let's get this show on the road. Hey, maybe we could all kind of move up since we had competition with Mother Nature today. It's a beautiful day. A lot of folks are probably out enjoying it. So actually special thanks to all of you who decided to come, and really means a lot. You truly care about the community. But I think if we're gonna make a call and, you know, not separate into 4 different groups, but maybe do a larger group interaction discussion on the goals and some next steps and milestones. So I think if we huddle up a little closer, that would help. But first and foremost, I want to thank you again for coming. Those who don't know me, my name is Bill Wilson. I'm actually the chair of the Master Steering Committee. Kind of came in halfway through. I'm also on the board of the select board here. So if there's anything issues in that area, you know, I represent the select board as well here today. With that said, you know, I don't have anything prepared notes. I want to get into it. It's going to get very interactive anyway. So I think Tyler or Judy, want to jump up and let's get the show on the road.
Sure.
Thanks.
No problem. So thank you, everyone. Can't come to a meeting like this without a presentation. So we do have a presentation for you. Some of it is content you may have seen a little of before. It depends on how actively involved you've been in the master plan process. So I promise not to drive you crazy if you've already seen some of this, but we want to make sure everybody kind of enters the activity we're going to ask you to do with more or less a level playing field. So I am Judy Barrett with Barrett Planning Group. I actually worked on your last master plan in 2000, the one that was approved in 2004. So for me, it's just a joy to be back here. It was just always a lovely community to work with and still is. And what's really fun is coming back after 20 years and seeing a lot of people who are still involved in the town who were here before. But it's also great to see new people as well, and it's been fun to kind of meet folks that I just never knew 20 years ago, either because you were busy with other stuff or you have moved here since then. So in any case, welcome to all of you. I'm only one person on this team. I'm sort of the principal of Barrett Planning Group. It's my firm, but we couldn't do what we do without the staff who take these projects and work so closely with your communities. So to my left, your right, is Tyler Marin, who is the project manager for this master plan and who has just done really a fabulous job, I think, working with your wonderful committee to try to move this along to the point that it's at now, which is talking about, you know, here's where you kind of say you want to go. Now let's talk about how you want to get there. We're also accompanied today by Amber Dillon, who is with us as well. Amber's a community planner at Barrett Planning Group. And so I have 2 folks here to kind of help move this process along. I also want to point out that in the first phase of this planning process, RKG Associates worked on the economic development piece of the plan, the sort of inventory of what you have. So I don't want to just ignore them. They actually were a pretty important part of that first phase of the effort. So up here you can see the names of the Master Plan Committee members. What Master Plan Committee members are here today, just so I know? I see a few of you. Yes, great, super. So we're going to put you to work soon. There were also people who used to be on the committee who stepped back when the committee was kind of scoped back to sort of make more of a working group. We're very grateful to them as well for everything that they did to move the process along. And we have Patrick Reffett here, who's the planning director for the town. I don't think Joe is here today, but your town manager has really been sort of instrumental in helping to get us on and move the process forward. So we're very grateful to Joe as well, and certainly to the select board who've been so supportive of having us come and help the committee complete this charge. So this is the welcome and introductions period. We do have a presentation. I'm going to try to expedite parts of it because you're probably familiar with some of the content. The really important part of this meeting is the sort of small group, which may be sort of a larger group given the number of attendees here. But we want to consult with you about things the town can do, actions the town can take from your point of view to achieve the goals that the Master Plan Committee has embraced. And the draft goals are in a handout up on that table where the sign-in sheet is. So you're going to see the goals one at a time on these sheets. They're going to be used for discussion purposes. They're big boards. But there's actually an 8.5 by 11 page over by the sign-in table that has all the goals together if you want to see them as one. And then we'll sort of kind of look at what everybody had to say, and we'll send you on your merry way on this gorgeous afternoon. So, quick review, what is a master plan? It always starts with what people sometimes scratch their heads wondering why we're doing it, and it's the existing conditions and inventory. People say, well, I already know about my town. I already know what's here. But, often people don't. And so it's really important when you're going to get to the part of the conversation you're having today, which is how do we get to where we want to go, it's really important to understand what you already have. So that existing conditions, what we call the inventory and assessment, is really a critical part of the planning process. It kind of answers the question, where are we now and how did we get here? The key issues, for some elements of a master plan, there aren't big challenges. For others, there are. So you try to sort of focus on what are the things that the town most needs to pay attention to on a going forward basis. What are the big challenges and how to address them? And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. There's a vision statement, which we'll show you in a second. There are a series of goals, which are on that sheet up back, and you will see them all on individual boards in a few minutes. And then that's really like, how do we now go forward? So it's a conversation that always is sort of the culminating point of every master plan process. Master plans matter to towns that adopt them and implement them. They create, first of all, opportunities for residents to learn more about their town than they may know coming into the process. They also can help town boards kind of interpret what the town's direction is when town boards are trying to make a decision. And that could be permitting decisions, it could be capital improvement decisions, it could be any number of things. But the point of the master plan is to be sort of a policy guidance document. It can help developers understand what this town wants to achieve going forward. So often, if you have a developer come to the building department or the planning department and say, I'm working with a landowner, I want to do something here, having sort of a cheat sheet version of the master plan can be very helpful to communicate to developers, this is what we're trying to become as a community as we continue to grow and change. And then I think probably the most important thing that comes out of this process is really understanding what are the parts of the community that you love and cherish and want to protect and preserve, and what are the things that need to change, because towns do change. Sometimes I think we'd all like to kind of freeze frame where we are, but that's not really reality. I can tell you coming back here after 20 years, there's a lot that's the same and there are things that have changed. So we've had community process pretty much from the start on this. There have been two kind of big community meetings so far. One was in person in February when it was freezing cold outside. There was one online in May, and then of course here today. But between those community meetings, the Master Plan Committee's done an enormous amount of work, and I don't want to take anything away from those folks. They've really been driving this process. So there's been a lot of meetings, at least a dozen or more, I would imagine. And then early on when we got involved, we talked to a lot of people. Just coming back, for me, it was coming back after 20 years. For my colleagues, it was, we don't really know anything about this community. Who do we need to talk to? So there were a lot of kind of group interviews early on in the process just to get acclimated to the town. For all those interviews, and as the community process has unfolded, we're working toward a plan that has a series of components. We call them master plan elements. Planners have their own terms. But really, as we're looking at those elements, there's a framework that the committee has adopted, which I think is a very useful one. And it's around protect, provide, and grow. So that's the framework for the entire plan. And for every element of the plan, the question has been, what do we need to protect? What do we need to provide? And how do we need to grow? So for each of the elements of the plan, which include land use, housing, economic development, natural resources, open space, cultural and historic resource areas, circulation and traffic, public facilities, those are the core elements of every master plan. The questions for the implementation program we're going to be talking about is, what do we need to protect, what do we need to provide, and how do we need to grow? So just an overview of some, what I call factoids coming out of the inventory process. The inventory, I believe, is online. Yeah, so the whole inventory report that Tyler worked tirelessly on, as did some other folks in our office.
Just to let you know, on the back of your agendas, there's the web address and a QR code. If you want to go look at any of this yourself, it's just hamiltonmasterplan.com. It's available to the public. Sorry to interrupt you, Judy.
No, it's fine. Thank you. That's an important point. The whole inventory is available, but I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot of kind of some of what it says. So Land use is sort of a central element in every plan. It's looking at your zoning, your land use pattern. You know, no surprise, you've zoned your town in such a way that almost all of it is zoned for residential and agricultural uses. And that was true 20 years ago, and it's still true today. You've chosen as a community to concentrate your economic growth kind of around the downtown area, and that's where most of your business activity is. More than a third of the land in your town is subject to some kind of conservation restriction. And I think, you know, these three things kind of say a lot. You're a town that sees yourself mainly as a residential suburb. You care about open space, and you've done a lot to protect it here on your own as a town and also with nonprofit partners. And you really kind of care about the kind of sort of family-oriented community that you've cultivated here over time. On the transportation side, you know, fortunately, you have commuter rail here, which is really a great asset to have. A lot of towns your size do not have that at all. So commuter rail is an important fixture of the community here. You don't have much for on-road bicycle infrastructure, which is really something that probably ought to be looked at for a family-oriented town. You know, where people do complain about car traffic, it's good to give people meaningful choices. But if you don't have safe infrastructure for pedestrians and bicycles, you're not going to get that alternative mobility that you perhaps would like to see. You've invested a lot as a town in road and drainage repairs to try to take care of what you have. That's a good sign. Sometimes we go into communities and we find the infrastructure is a mess. And I'm sure there are road conditions here that make people unhappy, but you've done a lot as a small town to try to take care of what you have. On the natural resource side, about a fourth of the town is located in floodplain areas. That's very important. It has implications for sustainability, for how you grow and what you protect. You have a lot of wetlands in the community. And of course, the Ipswich River, as I think you probably all know, is among the nation's most endangered rivers, mainly due to extended drought and non-point source pollution. So that raises significant kind of protection issues for the community. Cultural and historic resource areas, this is kind of the point of this element is what do you have physically that's important to understand about the physical evolution of your town, the historical evolution of your town. So you have about 238, when we say recognized historic resources, what that means is they're listed with the state as potentially important structures or objects or resource areas. There are other kinds of resources as well that have been documented here. People pay attention a lot to buildings, but bridges and cemeteries matter too. So some of these things have been inventoried better than others. It's kind of a common issue in a lot of towns we've worked in. Your Historic District Commission has adopted a design guidelines book to help people figure out what's probably going to fly and during the permitting process. That's very helpful to people who have a historic building that they want to make changes to. And you've adopted a demolition delay bylaw here since the last time I was in Hamilton. What that does is it allows the Historical Commission to review a potential change to a building that's perhaps not in the historic district, but has historic merit and perhaps ought to be looked at for some type of saving or protective action. Open space and recreation was always a dear topic the last time I was here, and it still is. You're fortunate to have several nonprofit partners here who've done a lot to help your town protect what you have. You have Mass Audubon here, you have Conservation and Recreation, the state agency, you have the Trustees of Reservations, you have Essex County Greenbelt, Myopia Hunt Club, and of course the town does own open space too, as does the town of Manchester own some land here. But I think really to the credit of everybody, you've had very effective partners. And that holds well for the town's ability to protect resources that it really cares about. And of course, you've recently completed a master plan for Patton Park. On the housing side, you are predominantly a single-family home community. Your home price here has almost doubled in just a few years. That's not uncommon. It's an issue throughout the Boston area. So if you own a home, you're lucky. It's worth a lot. If you're trying to buy in Hamilton, it's a challenge. So it's a double-edged sword. Your housing stock, as I said, is overwhelmingly single family. You do have some lower income households who live in your community, and some of them are paying a fortune to live here. We call them, as planners, unaffordably housed. So there is a need for affordable housing here. And sometimes that's hard to meet with single-family homes. So just something to bear in mind when you're zoning for different types of housing types. Think about what makes it economic to build at different price points. On the economic development side, you have a limited employment base here. I don't think that's any surprise. The town itself is the largest employer, single employer, of anybody here. Most of your people who work, who are in the labor force, either work here or in Beverly or in Boston. Yes?
Does that include the school system?
Yes. Yeah, it does. Coming from the outside, it's the town, but you're absolutely right. The school district is a separate entity. So governing entities in Hamilton are the largest employer. Your commercial tax base makes up just a fraction of your overall assessed value in this community. That was true 20 years ago as well. And we've tried in the plan to recognize that you have a Hamilton Development Corporation, which is trying to do some cool things around economic development and housing. We've tried to incorporate kind of what their mission is and their goals as well in the plan. On the community facilities and services side, you have a unique situation here, and I think you probably all know it, but the degree to which you share some services with Wenham is very unusual in Massachusetts. We do a lot of work on the Cape, we do work on the Vineyard, places where you would expect to find more regional or interlocal cooperation. You don't really find the degree of connectivity that you have here in Hamilton and Wenham. So it's a unique attribute, and credit to all of you. You have a recent watershed study here that points out that you need to upgrade your water infrastructure to meet demand. That's no surprise. It's an issue in almost every community we work in. Your school committee is working to evaluate a new elementary school project. And Town Hall and the Municipal Safety Building need repairs and renovations. And a lot of that we kind of heard from the interviews early on with your town staff, just trying to understand the condition of the infrastructure and facilities in your community. So that's sort of the inventory from which we took a leap with the committee. And then the committee started working on a vision statement, which is really sort of the overarching kind of guiding document for the plan, as well as goals. I'm going to show you the vision statement because it's manageable in 3 slides. I'm not going to go through all the goals because you're going to get to go through them in a minute anyway on this activity we have for you. They're also, as I said, printed out on a sheet back with the sign-in table. But I'll at least share with you kind of the framework. So you have a vision, goal, and key issues that are all kind of interrelated. A vision statement is really an aspirational view of where you want your town to be at the end of the plan's lifespan. People say, well, how long is this plan going to be good? Typically, master plans in Massachusetts, really, I think in most jurisdictions, are about 10 years is about the span that you can really see ahead enough to know what you probably can accomplish. It's fine in an implementation program to have actions that go beyond 10 years. It just becomes harder to program them. It's harder to estimate what you need to do them, and it's harder to estimate what it might take to get them done. But many communities include things that go beyond 10 years. But 10 years is sort of a planning horizon that you can reasonably see what you might be able to accomplish. The goals are kind of milestones that you want to achieve through the implementation process. And the issues are the most significant challenges that you face. So that key issues document has pretty much been developed. The goals have been developed, and the vision statement certainly has as well. So the vision statement's organized around that protect, provide, and grow framework that the committee adopted early on. And it's really neat because it helps to focus on sort of a way of thinking about how you want to manage the physical evolution of your town. In terms of protecting, you want to be able to say Hamilton's a town that protects and preserves our history, our agricultural and equestrian traditions, that you protect the natural landscapes that you have that makes the town so beautiful and contributes to its visual character, as well as to protect those sensitive environmental resources that are essential for public health and safety, and frankly, the protection of wildlife. And then also a town that protects the ability of households to call Hamilton home. You want to be able to say that Hamilton is a town. Did I miss one? No, I didn't. I just did them in the wrong order. Sorry. Hamilton is a town that will grow its downtown into a vibrant destination for business, for culture, recreation, and transit. A town that grows its local business community and housing stock while kind of planning to manage what you have well, and grows a local network of public access trails, paths, and sidewalks to help people experience the community without needing to rely on cars. And then Hamilton's a town that will provide safe and adequate utilities, roads, and accessible public spaces, a high quality and up-to-date public schools and facilities, and robust public recreation programs and facilities, especially public open space. So that's the vision. And under the vision, there's a series of goals, which is what we're going to look at today. And I'm about to turn this over to you so you can explain this activity. You're going to be looking at those goals that are kind of the anchors for the vision and help us think about what do you think your town could do to help achieve those different goals. So it's a brainstorming session. I'm going to be asking you what you think. I cannot guarantee that everything you say is going to end up in this plan. I certainly hope it does, but I can certainly tell you that the ideas you provide are going to be very helpful to the committee and the consultants in figuring out how to develop an implementation program that's actually achievable for the town of Hamilton. So would you like to take over at this point? Sure. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. So basically, the crux of the exercise we're going to be asking you to do is, like Judy said, identifying specific action items you'd like to see included in this master plan. So the way we've structured this is we have one sort of sheet layout for each of the 8 master plan elements, housing, land use, natural resources that Judy went over earlier. On each one, we have the goal for that section. So we'll read through each goal. And then on each, we've provided a couple of potential proposed action items. Some of these are taken from older plans. Some of these are ideas that came out of committee discussions, out of previous public engagement events. But those are just 2 to sort of kick us off, get us started. They aren't necessarily going into the plan. They're just 2 items that might, and we'll be brainstorming a lot more items for consideration in the plan. So that's sort of the main walkthrough. Ignore everything about the stations and the posters. I think we're going to consolidate it, walk through everything together as a group. I'm going to come out amongst you and take some notes. I'll pass out if you would like to write your own. We can pass out the sticky notes, but I'll mostly be having a conversation back and forth, prompting you and then writing down your ideas. And so at the end of it, we'll be left with a list of proposed actions and ideas, and then we'll put everything out and ask you to identify with like little dot voting what are some of your top ideas that came out of this process. And so ideally we'll be left with, as we're trying to craft this implementation section of the plan, some good ideas that have been vetted by the members of the community that have been here, ideas that you have critiqued or originated from you, and identify which ones are most desirable. So I'll go ahead and take a minute to set this up. So I'm actually going to put the goals and action items up on this screen because we had a little bit of a snafu with the materials, but I have all the versions to show you up here. So excuse me for 1 minute while I do that, and then I will come out and start the exercise. I think, yeah, you're all fairly close together. I'll come out to be closer to you. I don't know if we'll need the microphone. Yes. All right. Sorry for the dead air, but 1 minute. If you need more snacks, go get them now.
Because the actions are different when you're talking about residential as opposed to the town's own, facilities and services. So I would just say, why don't you brainstorm actions? We'll figure out how to work them in.
So, the town has community choice aggregation, which allows you to buy your electricity from various vendors.
Can you all hear him? Because okay, you know what? I'm going to walk around with the mic. I can play MC today. Here you go.
So Emmett, this is really your thing. Do you want to? Okay, well, fill in. The town has community choice aggregation, which means most people get signed up when they move into the town to buy a percentage of electricity that is actually greener than what you get from National Grid. But if you choose to pay a little bit more, you can increase that green ratio in your electricity up to 100%. So a really great action for the town would be to engage assertively in educating residents about the value of choosing 100% green energy. Is that fair?
Do you want me to take it over?
Yeah. Carbon monoxide out there, or carbon dioxide.
Use the mic, just so they can all hear.
There's sort of three areas. So electricity is one, and people are thinking, solar panels on roofs is what people think of a lot, but you can actually, through community choice aggregation that the town has had since 2018, go 100% green just through the town. We have a website on that. So promoting that. Upgrading your house with Mass Save, and which is giving you free insulation and all of that, but really promoting that as part of the town. So you can upgrade your house's insulation, as well as, instead of buying an air conditioner or upgrading your furnace, going to electric heat pumps, because the electrification, that's a zero carbon way to heat your house. And then the third thing is really transportation. And that is, over the next few years, when you have to replace your car, to think about going to, a total EV vehicle and replacing that. Another area for that is just the school buses for the town. That's, a huge aspect. The town actually has a school bus service, but to go for electric school buses as we evolve. Again, you start now. It's going to take a time to cycle through the whole fleet of school buses to upgrade them, but whether it's school buses, police cars, construction equipment from the DPU, that's going to be the last thing that we get to, with technology still being developed for the big heavy equipment.
Excellent. Thank you. Other contributors? Other thoughts? Yes.
Well, I just had two thoughts. One is people often think of solar panels as being on roofs, but there are solar arrays that can be used if your roof doesn't receive enough sunlight, and perhaps that can be encouraged one way or another through regulation, because obviously they're sometimes can be a little unattractive, but if sited properly, their impact could be minimized. And the other thing I thought is that since we're likely to be building a new school, we should make sure that the new school incorporates either solar panels or a solar array. And that could actually just morph right into whole courses on green development in the schools.
Excellent. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to, before I make my point, piggyback on Marnie's, is besides solar, also geothermal in new construction would certainly be a viable option. Water resources, a very critical goal, and the Chabaco watershed area is not classified. I'm not sure how we get classified. I don't know the how of this, but I do know the why of it, is somehow getting that area classified as an environmentally sensitive area to avoid development that will have stormwater issues running off into the Beck Pond, which is the same as Round Pond, Gravelly Pond. They're all the same water underneath the ground. And I've used this line many times, but we can't be arrogant enough, particularly with the Ipswich watershed issue, to realize we have a water resource that's right in our town that we need to protect.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to build on a comment earlier about public education, that the town, some of these goals should really look at the way in which they can leverage town government to provide more information for residents. In that case, it was about energy consumption, but I'd like to also see that applied to natural resource protection. For example, green yards that promote the safety and health of our native pollinators and native plants, that encourage people to use lights that are more are friendlier to insects and birds and all of that. There are towns, most of them larger than Hamilton, that I'm aware of, that not only have conservation commissions, but have tree wardens and have community outreach, water quality programs, and have public education and outreach as an essential component. So I'm not sure how to wrap it up, but.
No, I think that's very helpful. You know, several years back, we were working with a town in central Mass, and they had a display garden outside their town hall on having a garden with all native species, and then another one with a rain garden, and how you could do a rain garden on residential property. So those kinds of public education tools are really helpful. In addition to having content on a website, it's like every time you walk into town hall to see the town clerk or whatever, there's a rain garden, and you can see what that looks like. Any thoughts on other topics up here that relate to the town's natural resources and preservation efforts? I'll get you. I'm going to get Rosie first. I'll be right over. Yes.
So I have a thought. I was drawing on your comment about making information more accessible. So one of the hot issues now are athletic fields, our artificial turf athletic fields. And one of the ways we can protect our town resources and the natural resources is to enact town bylaws, not necessarily zoning bylaws, but town bylaws that are not that are impervious to, say, a 40B development, or are impervious to people who just want something because they think an athletic turf field would be a great idea. I was very dismayed at town meeting, although there was a vigorous argument to have the turf fields, there was not a whole lot of argument as to why we shouldn't have the turf fields. And even in such a short period of time, a lot of information has come out. And I think it's the responsibility of the town to protect natural resources by putting information like that onto their website, as well as to enacting town bylaws to protect. So for example, there is a state legislative initiative right now to ban artificial turf in Massachusetts. Why didn't we know about that, right? We know Boston has done it, we know a lot of other towns have done it, but and I don't have an answer as to how to do this, but I think that the town really should be more proactive about enacting bylaws that protect specific interests.
Okay. I'm going to take one from Jack, and then we're going to move to the next goal, if you don't mind, just because. Okay, let me get Jack first. There you go.
I just want to note that in the former plan for redoing the town hall, there was provision for getting off gas. Gas is the principal heat source for that, and I believe it is the principal heat source, either that or oil, for all of our schools. Our schools, as you know, are all pretty much obsolete structures. They were built in the 50s and 70s when the energy cost a great deal different, a very different price. So those are areas that of concern that need to be taken into account as quickly as possible. There will be an issue in the upcoming on the 6th of November at the town hall meeting concerning the town hall, at least to begin the restoration process, to attempt to get back to what was voted down before. And it will not include the HVAC, but that we're trying to get that in the grants subsequently. These are all issues that we need to be very much cognizant of to decarbonize our town.
Excellent. We guess
Really
quickly.
quick comment. I'm sorry, your name? Kathy. Just to piggyback on what she said, the DPW, head of DPW is the tree warden. And that's a real problem for me. We just had a tree hearing for 140 trees to be taken down on Chabaco Road. And the person who's running this as a tree warden is also the DPW head who is doing the project. It's a problem.
Okay, I think we're going to move to another goal. No, just because we've got a lot to talk about. But we actually probably can be very helpful on some of this because we just happen to be working with the city of Northampton right now, helping them update some of the components of their Sustainable Northampton Comprehensive Plan. And this is a huge issue out there. So I think a lot of these educational, public facility types of comments that you've said, we can kind of draw from what's happening out there. And I think you're going to find some of those actions to be achievable even in a town this small. So let's go to land use, if you don't mind. So the land use goal. I got to get up close. When you get to be my age, you can't see from a distance anymore. You mean you can't retain a thought? Okay. Okay, so adopt land use regulations that promote responsible commercial and residential development while protecting the town's open spaces, natural landscapes, and built environment by prioritizing redevelopment. Yes, sir.
I saw in the accumulation of data tables, one thing that we are lacking is a summation of all the developed property and the remainder of undeveloped, developable property in this town. Because land is the only asset we have, and it cuts across economic development, housing, land use, almost all of these. So I'm wondering if in those tables we can actually come up with a simple number of developable leftover.
I would love to ask your assessor if he could come up or she could come up with that number, and you know what? Their head's going to explode, and I'll tell you why. The assessors do look at land based on its development potential. And there are codes in the assessor's database that say this is developable, this might be developable, this is not developable. So you can pretty much assume that what the assessor says is not developable is not developable. The question is, what do you do with those parcels that might be developable? So they might be parcels that, for example, don't have frontage today, but if joined with an adjoining property, they become that way. There's only so much we're going to be able to do. We can say, this is what your assessor is calling developable. This is what could be developable. And then you've got other lands that may be under, say, a Chapter 61A or 61 agreement that we don't have enough information about, but we can tell you how much land that is. I just want to caution you on one thing. I've been doing this for a long time, and everybody always asks this question, how much land is left? My experience is that that's not really the problem. The problem is when all that land has finally got a house on it or something, and now someone comes along and wants to change it. It's the change of the existing structures that causes mayhem in a lot of towns because people have grown up around, now they've got a bunch of abutters, and those people have seen that house the way it was or that store or whatever. It's always been that way, and now someone wants to change it. So although we can answer your question, I want to just point out that the Master Plan Committee is, I think, rightly noting that redevelopment is an important thing not to lose sight of, because that's where the next generation of trouble comes. It's when all the land is used. Don't think that your town's not going to change anymore, because it is. It's a different kind of tension. So we'll do that, but then I'm just going to tell you, there's going to be a big footnote. So.
What kind of control do you want to have over redevelopment of land and where? So,
Yep, agreed. And that's why we're asking this question. So what do you think the town can do or should do to address this goal? Adopting land use regulations, yes, sir.
I've got a question, first of all. Land use goal, is this the only goal in land use that we're going to look at?
Every element has one goal.
And this is it?
This is the goal the master plan committee has
Okay.
agreed to, yes.
And the same with natural resources?
Yes.
So we're just talking about one thing, basically,
Well, there's
energy
multiple things.
conservation. But here, there are multiple things, but the redevelopment aspect to this is only 1/10 of what sustainability is asking you to do
Yep.
in growing. So I think this is only part of the question. So maybe also a better understanding of what redevelopment actually means. That is, land that has been disturbed
Right.
primarily. That needs to be defined somewhere much more
Okay.
clearly, instead of,
That's
in other words, you could say open space or undeveloped land or something should be avoided. But I don't disagree with that, but I think if this is the only goal, I think that's not quite broad enough, because I think you could have then quite a long list of some of the other aspects for sustainability, like mixed-use development, like, equity and diversity and types of development and all of
Right.
those things that cover the 10 primary points.
You may
So,
get to some of that under the housing goal.
yeah. The last thing I'll say on this one, on land use, this to me is the single most important one you're going to be doing in the whole master plan. And that all of the others will feed into
Are
this.
you a planner?
No, well, yeah, I am. They're all going to feed into land use. So it is the ultimate point where things will come into play.
That's right.
And be mixed together. This should be the last one, the most important one. I'm just giving you my opinion on this, so that everything else then informs this one.
I agree,
So-
and we probably, can I take my microphone
Yeah,
back so you can all hear me? Because what I have to say is very important. No, it's fine. I probably should have put this one last. And it's a fair comment, because you are right. Land use is the ultimate thing that coheres everything else in the plan. So the cheat sheet version of this is, when you get to some of the other goals, I think you're going to see some of these other issues come into play. I like to think of the master plan as ultimately a document that is to guide the physical evolution of the community, taking into account the community's housing needs, the community's employment needs, the community's natural resource needs. It's like the thing that brings it all together. So I think you're going to see in an implementation chart in the plan ways to connect these goals. But it's fair comment. Thank you.
And implementation, the redevelopment potential is probably greatest in the Winthrop School site. We've been talking about that for decades. It's almost as long as I've lived in this town, which is longer than I like to think of. And the implementation has been what's tripped us up over and over again. We just keep signing that new lease because it's the path of least resistance. So I'm hoping, Judy, we're going to really get down into brass tacks on implementation, how we're actually going to get cracking on some of these kind of things, because otherwise it'll never happen.
That's why we're talking to you people today, because, we can come up with all kinds of ideas, because we're planners, right? But we need to know what's realistic. And that's why we want to consult with you, is what do you think is realistic? And don't be surprised if some of you don't agree about what's realistic or what should be done. But that's why we're having this conversation. Yes.
I want to echo Emil's comment. I think that we should, in fact, consider land use last, because when I reviewed the action items, I realized that they implicated so many other components. So we should probably talk about those other components before we actually see how we would want to try and integrate planning for the Winthrop School, and also whatever may transpire at Gordon Conwell. But
So I think what I'm going to ask you to do, because I did take them in this order, and you can blame me later, is work with us the way we're feeding them to you, and trust us to come back with showing you how these things come together. It's a fair comment. I just don't want to interrupt the middle of this, but you're right. I mean, that is ultimately the thing that brings it together. Yes.
I think when you're looking at land use goals, the things that concern me the most are the threats to the community that affect the natural resources, the open space, and all of those things. And I think there are 3 areas of threats that I see in the town, i.e. redevelopment of the large estates that could be broken up and reused in different uses that we perhaps didn't contemplate, commercial uses, industrial, whatever. also fringe areas of town. You never really think about it, but the areas that are adjacent to other communities are the most vulnerable, and they tend to be your rural areas in your community. So I would say it's either 2 or 3, rural and or fringe, or rural and fringe combined.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to say something about, since you brought up the Winthrop School and that, I kind of actually have a very different feeling about that. I think that it's very important to have a school in that location, and it builds a great community. I'm really, really concerned that the town has been moving this kind of forward, these ideas to combine school and create like a large elementary school. I think that will change so much our community. Among the different threats that we've been talking about, like the environmental threats and other, I would add the threat to our community. So when we work on this large land use goals and plans, I think we should keep that in our mind. So what are we doing to our communities if we change, if we make these big changes? And I just feel like creating a big school, like a mega school that has 700 or more kids in one side, and these are little kids, 5-year-old kids. Would you send your kid in a school like that? I have a 2-year-old now. I moved here for the schools, and I have 3 older kids, 2 that are in elementary school, 1 is in middle school right now. We loved sending our kids to the Winthrop School. We met so many families. We met so many friends, and we are not from here, and we love it. We just like settled so well because of that feel. So I just I want to say how important it is to me to keep that in mind when we develop. And what are we really changing? What are we breaking? Are we breaking it forever? So yeah, just keep that in mind.
That's fine. And that may come back up again under another goal. So I'm going to take one more comment on this, and then I'm going to say we'll put this one aside and we'll take the other goals, all right? And we'll come back to this.
Thanks, everyone. I want to, again, I echo what Francesca said about the schools. It's a great community. It's wonderful to have that small home feel. Putting that idea aside, though, with this land use, and I'm a little new to this process, so I apologize if these conversations have been had before. But what is our actual goal in terms of some of the other things we have? And I know we're focusing on land goals, but if we're going to take Winthrop School and we're going to turn it into commercial, does that actually mean the goals that this town wants? Are we going to turn it into more housing because that's what this town wants? I still haven't seen cohesiveness in terms of what are we trying to achieve, and then how are we going to do so? Because if we just say we want to increase our commercial base by, say, 10%, do we have the opportunity to do that by going up a level on Railroad Ave and in the Crosby's Plaza? Is that one way that we could meet that goal without doing some other things? Do we need to go further out? How do we think about our planning and our land use based on what it is that we're trying to achieve? More residential, more commercial, bigger tax base, bigger affordable housing. How are we thinking all that, and then what does that drive?
Thank you. Tyler, why don't we take another goal and come back to land use? I think that there's a valid point here, and maybe rethinking this when we have had a chance to clarify some of the others.
How do you prioritize redevelopment?
Well, what you would try to do from a land use perspective is maybe have regulations that encourage reuse of existing assets. It's mainly regulatory. It could be financial. I mean, we have a few examples in Massachusetts of communities that have used tax incentives to support reuse of existing assets. And almost like it's called tax increment financing, but it's a way to sort of hold the taxes at whatever a property's worth now, so that the taxes don't go up immediately from the new investment, but they gradually increase. So it's a way to kind of think about making reinvestment economic. I would encourage you to add these things where you think they go, and let us sort out where to park them. Bearing in mind that every action in the implementation program is probably not going to relate to just one goal. Usually they relate to more than one. I mean, that's the ideal situation, is that you have something that's in land use and is in economic development and is in, community facilities or something like that. So I know we're kind of taking these in isolation, but when you're trying to take notes, it's probably the easiest way to do it. So let's look at another one. Open space and recreation? Sure.
We've never had a planning process in this town longer than 1 year. The FinCom looks 1 year ahead. Capcom now looks out 5 years. We really need to totally reinvigorate our whole planning process. So there's a constant debate going on, one town meeting to the next, so that all of these different things are taken into account. Winthrop School, the future of Winthrop School, Gordon Conwell, all of these things. There are just tremendous numbers of things that need to be laid out, looked at, and then debated in town, and we've never done that more than 1 year out. So this is the critical function that I think we're missing.
Okay, thanks, Jack. So the open space goal is protect existing green spaces, scenic vistas, trails, and recreation sites, improve local recreation programs, and make town-owned outdoor recreation areas available and accessible for the entire community. So that's the goal. I'd like to hear your thoughts on actions the town could take to help address that. Go ahead. I'll get to you next.
One project I think we really need to look at is we have a right-of-way, which is now the gas line that goes through town, and if that had a little stone dust on it, became a regular sort of an old railroad right-of-way kind of a thing where it could bring people by bicycle into the station. It could be a better walking trail than it is right now. Where it's overgrown, it could be utilized. It goes right out through Wenham. It's a wonderful track through town that is not utilized to the extent that it should be, and I think that's a resource that we really need to look at on many, many bases.
Okay, thank you.
So my thought is about the trails and the use of bike paths. I'm not sure I'm in the right goal here, but just thinking about it as one drives down our very narrow major roads such as Highland Ave, it's such an accident waiting to happen, and I know there have been fatal accidents of bicyclists on some of these very narrow roads, and so a place like Highland Ave, it's not possible to put a sidewalk because there just isn't the width. So I would think about a plan to make bike paths using some of the roads in Hamilton and make some of these dangerous roads prohibited to bicyclists, but have an alternate route available. I think that would add to the safety of bicyclists.
So I actually remember when I started working on the last master plan, which was roughly in 2002 when we started, there had just been a fatal accident on Highland Ave, a kid on a bicycle, and it was just traumatic for this community. I remember that quite well. Yeah, I'm sure. Other comments? Yes.
So redo the Great Estates bylaw to make it actually an attractive, workable bylaw, as opposed to a structured that defeats the purpose of protecting great estates when they hit the market.
Okay. Other thoughts? Open space, yes.
Well, I agree with Rick. I think the Great Estates bylaw, as well as the open space and farmland preservation development bylaws, could be re-examined and I think seriously simplified to make them much more friendly. Right now, I know the open space and farmland development bylaw it's pretty cumbersome, and that's why it has never been used. And with respect to Patton Park, I mean, that's very interesting because, oh, I'm sorry. With respect to Patton Park, that really, again, this goes to land use a little bit, but it plays in to any potential reuse of the Winthrop School site, as well as how to integrate all of this into the downtown and make the whole area pedestrian friendly.
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts? Yes. Here you go.
Thank you. A comment on this, the open space would be, I think it's important. This is an example of some of the connectivity between so many aspects of the community that makes it look the way it does. And I think if you were to ask a lot of people in town, open space might be the first word that comes up in defining what is this town about. So I think it's important that whatever gets done, if this is looking forward as a strategy to plan, I think what's important is to look at open space and recreation through an important lens, and that's community character, and that's community ambiance. So when you look at it in that respect, then you put value on what that open space is. And this kind of goes to your question about how do you prioritize things for economic development versus preservation, for example. This is how you do it, I think, and how you would find out what you treasure as a community. And if it is open space and a particular type of open space, the equestrian aspect is really very important here in town. So I think you have to look at those things, look at open space through that lens. And when you do that, then you can then prioritize and come up with good ideas like networks of green space or green belts to allow trails to go through the community without interruption, for example. And I understand there are a lot of equestrian trails that are open to the public for hiking and so forth throughout the town. Those are the things that are really subtle and you don't think about until you don't have them anymore. And when they're gone, then you start to realize what was there and what's now missing.
Thank you. Any other comments on the open space? Did you want to say something? Here you go.
I would just add a quick comment about the trails. So one of the problems that I'm seeing in our trails, and I'm not sure the town, unless it's town-owned property, and town-owned property can really regulate this. But one of the problems with the trails is if it's open to everybody, then it doesn't serve anybody's needs. I mean, we've had lots of issues with horses and bikes being on trails, and there have been collisions and near fistfights about all the differing values. And so maybe thinking about which trails would be best for which entity might help the town to maybe I don't know, incorporate use for everybody, but maybe in different areas.
Thank you. Of course, certainly.
Gosh, we were in the habit last year of taking 3-hour walks wherever we found trails and found them everywhere, and never ran into any conflicts of any kind. But and that was leading me to think of going in the opposite direction, which is having better maps, more accessible to people so that they can really take advantage of all of the amazing access that we do have. And perhaps some investment on the part of our outdoor rec people, our rec department in outdoor equipment, like we've got now a landing on the Ipswich River. Couldn't we? I know there are liability issues to have town kayaks, but Audubon has kayaks, or canoes anyway. I'm not sure why we couldn't. And other kinds of events that are actually outdoors that are sponsored community events, because the community doesn't really take advantage of them for building community as much as they could.
Do people generally know where the trails are in town? No. Okay.
A lot of them are on private land.
Hold on, one sec.
There's a tension about advertising
Yeah.
their existence, because I think a lot of landowners don't want lots of people.
Yeah. We've heard this in other towns. Just a sec, I want to take this and then I'll get over to you.
The Essex County Trail Association, which I know wasn't included in your list of communities, they do have trail maps. But to Rosie's point, I think if the town did have maps, it could incorporate trail etiquette, because I think that Rosie was really referring to horses, because loose dogs and people on bikes can pose real risks to horses. And I know I was almost hit by a bicyclist, but for the grace of God, I did not become separated from my mount. Right. So I think it's just a question of educating people about how to respond to horses, and it's not necessarily jumping into the woods and being silent. So But bicyclists are really, if they're not paying attention, they can come around a corner and really, really trigger horses' flight response.
Did you want to add something?
I'm on the trails every day. I don't see a lot of people out there. There are horses out there. There are bicycles out there. The bicycles, I have to say, in Willowdale, they're really very civil. They come up behind, say, I'm behind you, because I don't hear them coming. I'm an old guy. My hearing is not great. But I was out there this morning with a group of veterans walking around the woods, and it's just a matter of civility. It's just a matter of, being aware of other people. And some horses get spooked. If you come up behind a horse, you want to talk to them so they know that it's a person behind them because they can't see you back there. It's just that these are matters, and there is the Explore Hamilton Trail. I don't know where you get maps, maybe from the town clerk or the rec department or something, but there are little signs all over the place saying go this, go away. And then you just explore. That's the fun of it.
Hopkinton did a nice brochure several years ago with a map, a town-wide map that would open up. And the scouts had gone out with a GPS unit and actually mapped the trails because the town didn't have good data. So they were able to show on a map where the different types of trails were by preferred usage. And then inside the brochure, there was a little description of each major property with trails to acquaint people with where the private property line starts, and then also what the trail's intended usage was. So it's just kind of a thought. I mean, I'm sure you already have maps online, as you said, but sometimes even having a map that people can take out in the field with them is very helpful. Yes.
You actually touched on what I was going to say is put this stuff online. Like the next generation, I haven't used a trail map in a really long time. Everything's online. So yeah, more accessible. Or work with all the apps that are on there, All Mountain. Working with all those guys. Everything's online.
Yeah, I forgot about the apps. That's my age. I get to go away with this. Anything else on open space, please, before we go to the next one? Okay, let's move on then. Why don't we go to housing, and then we can go to economic development. Let's keep land use over here, so we keep it separate. If you can bring the other ones up, Amber, that would be great. So housing. The housing goal is to provide a regulatory framework to develop diverse housing types in a creative and environmentally conscious manner, and grow the town's stock of affordable housing appropriate for a range of ages and household sizes, including affordable senior housing. So that's the goal, and I'm wondering what you think the town could do to help carry this out. Yes.
I think the only way you're going to get affordable housing is either you subsidize it or you have density. And the density is not something that we've ever done in this town. And when you're talking 3 and 4 stories and an elevator and all that kind of thing, the big question is, unfortunately, why would anybody build, if they pay $500,000 for a buildable site, why would they put something affordable on it? It's not going to happen. If you see those 2 houses that were just built on Cutler Road, they both sold, they're right next to each other, they're no great shakes, and they sold for over $1 million. I mean, this is crazy. But that's where the money is, and that's what the developers want. And so we don't have the money in town to subsidize it. And we're not going to have the money in town to subsidize it until we get some kind of commercial development that the housing just isn't going to pay to subsidize.
Okay. Oops. Other thoughts?
About what the MBTA requirement is going to require the town to do?
Patrick, I'm going to refer that question to Patrick.
The town has worked with a consultant to craft out an area that is compliant with the state regulations. They have provided us with an area that's 68 acres as opposed to the 49 that is required. So we have asked that consultant to resize it in a way that hits that state requirement as opposed to giving us a 32% overage. So when we get that back and it's workable and something that we can share, we'll certainly do that. But until we can get that consultant's work refined, we have something that we're not happy with at the moment.
So what's the total number of units the town has to zone for?
We have to zone for 750.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, did that answer your question? Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes. Here you go.
So I'm going to take an opposite position of Jack, is we actually need to zone for a higher level of density, and it doesn't mean 3- and 4-story buildings. So that's the answer to the question is, and gets back to the land use, is how do you use the land tastefully, effectively to provide the housing that we're trying to provide? And the only way you do that is through careful use of that land and increasing the density level, because single-family housing is extremely inefficient and land consumptive, and it destroys the open space that everybody says they love in town. So we have to get by that bias that density is bad.
Okay. Other thoughts? I'll work around this way. Here you go. Make sure you speak into the mics.
Oh, right. The MBT Communities Law casts quite a shadow over the town because in some respects it's mandatory. The Department of Housing and Community Development has issued guidelines. The guidelines are not regulations, so one has to be clear as to what is mandated and what may or may not be actually mandated. But so it's my understanding that Hamilton would have to zone, as of right zoning, for multifamily housing at a density of 15 dwelling units per acre as an average. Okay, and that zoning has to be for an area of reasonable size. It's not exactly mandated. It has to be a reasonable size. And the housing does not have to be built. It's the as of right zoning subject to site plan review that has to be implemented. And if a town doesn't do that, the act actually says 3 sources of funding would be curtailed. The guidelines, however, have added to that list. So until there's some type of determination as to whether the guidelines have the force of regulation, then there's a gray area there. But it is something that the town has to consider because of the half-a-mile radius from the commuter rail station. So obviously that has the potential to seriously impact all of the downtown and the Winthrop School site. So it's not something we can stick our head in the sand and ignore and think that it might go away, because on top of everything else, if that as of right zoning were to be adopted, it can be done so by a majority at town meeting, not 2/3.
Other comments? Did I see a hand go up over here or not? Did you?
Question.
Sure.
I have just a couple of questions more than comments or anything. But so regarding this rezoning and this sort of aspects, there are numbers that are mandated by the state, and I understand that some funding, the town may not be eligible for some type of funding in case we don't comply fully, and could that be quantified and benchmarked against everything else on the table and to have a full picture of what would be the final cost of it? And also on the other hand, and again, I'm very, very new to this, so I apologize if the question is very, very naive, but is there any discussion to kind of sort of look into this together with Wenham, since we partner on a lot of other things as towns? And in rural, small towns like ours, obviously spaces are a big problem. So maybe working together with a partner could help finding more solutions.
So the law doesn't specifically provide for a sharing of the numbers of units, but it's certainly, we're working with Abington and Rockland are probably going to look at an area along their town border because the Abington train station happens to be near Rockland. where they might try to do some shared, a sort of a shared planning approach to complying with the law. So it's not that it's impossible, but the towns have to be talking. Did you want to say something too?
A question as well. A question. My understanding is that Hamilton is low on its affordable housing. So I guess, are we taking these two projects into consideration together? There feels like two birds, one stone.
So I wish I could tell you that state policy is coherent. It's really hard for me to do that. The reality is they're very different laws. And the subsidized housing law, the comprehensive permit law you're referring to, is much older. It goes back to 1969. And the whole premise of that law is that if you don't have at least 10% of the housing in your town is affordable, then you're deemed not to have met your regional fair share. So it's about the regional planning law. That's what 40B is. 3A, so-called, which is the more recent MBTA communities law, is challenging towns to do their own planning. Because for 35 years in this field, all I've heard is people complain that the state is forcing us to do something. So now what the state is saying is you got to plan, and everybody's complaining about doing the planning. So, you get to decide. Do you want to comply with the law or not? I just want to correct one thing. The statute does say there are 3 different programs that you become categorically ineligible for, one of which is called MassWorks. It's kind of the fund that communities use to do major infrastructure projects to support development. All the other stuff that's been listed is you may be affected. Your application might be less competitive, but they're not ineligible. So just be really clear factually about what the law says and what it doesn't say.
We also heard, though, that you can't opt out.
You can't. Yeah, there's no waiver.
So I just wanted to add a comment about your question. This new 3A does not provide necessarily for affordable housing, so it is very different.
Yeah, that's true. That's one of the weird, talk about inconsistent laws, right? So it's pretty funny. Anyway, yes, go ahead, and I'll get you.
Whatever the final number comes out to be with the MBTA housing requirement, this is a huge opportunity for the town of Hamilton, actually, to create the right tool to deal with this project and deal with it in a way that gets the best result and is predictable. And it's going through a form-based code in the downtown area that really makes a lot of sense. And it is a way that you don't turn it over to a developer to come in and say, okay, you figure it out, you do something that we're going to like. Chances are you're not going to like it. And so the town should take a proactive approach and decide this is what we want to see. Everybody gets involved, like a session like this. And that's the way it's going to happen. And so I think that you could turn this into a real opportunity for the community. We need the housing. The downtown is the place to put it. And if you do it really nicely, you're not going to destroy the town or the character. And that's the critical part of this.
Thank you.
I'm next.
Oh,
Are you?
Sorry. You can go.
Are you? Are you really?
I was, but you go first.
Well, I'll make it short. I was just going to say that I'm sitting here thinking of senior housing and the fact that there are some really interesting models out there. And I don't think that we should wait for somebody to come up with a really interesting model, because they're mostly going to come up with models that are not built for people like me, that are rely on having children to help or a hired help or whatever to stay in place and are fairly isolating. But co-housing opportunities, for example, co-housing that's either built in or is connected with a volunteer outfit, with folks volunteering to do things for one another, and transportation that's built in. But I really think that if we want affordable senior housing, we should be looking at models that we really like and try and attract people in.
Now it's your turn.
Well, that was excellent. And I would just add, I think Marnie's right. I do think it's a big, big deal and potentially a shadow. I know there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to be required, But, and I think for people it may be very scary because it will, I think, really change some things about the town. But it's also an opportunity. I think people may be afraid it's going to bring in a different kind of person. But is that bad? I think it would be nice to have a town where, we can have households of all kinds and not just a monoculture of single-family homes. So it's an opportunity to think about things we could really benefit from in terms of changes downtown.
Thank you. If it's about MBTA communities, I just want to make sure we focus on this goal and not get, yeah.
I think to Emil's point, this MBTA communities can present an opportunity, and I know the HDC and the Planning Board are both wanting to explore a form-based code so that whatever change occurs, that the character of the town can be maintained and respected.
Okay, any other comments on this housing goal, which is, sure. I want to get to people who haven't spoken yet, by the way. No, go right ahead, Jack. I didn't mean that.
At the risk, just keep in mind that at the moment, Wenham's Public Housing, which is, as you know, just across from Hamilton's border and the other side of the Prince property, which is probably the only place that they can actually develop 750 units to complement our 750 units, and their present housing is capped off by septic considerations because the water table is so high in that entire area. And it's going to take a pretty sophisticated septage plant to deal with that amount of 1,500 units of housing plus any expansion that they may have tried subsequently. So it is going to take a plan such as Emil is talking about, where the entire thing with the two towns is taken together as a package, or we're going nowhere.
So I just want to point out, this is part of why housing is so difficult, is that because MBTA communities is the cause du jour, that's what everybody's talking about, but that's not what this goal is about. And so I just really want you to focus on what the goal is, for which MBTA communities could be a tool, it could be an implementation piece, but let's not spend the whole conversation about one state law that we all know everybody's kind of contentious about. Let's look at other things.
Comment also. So one of the concerns that I have is the new housing. It's not affordable housing that's over on Bridge Street and in Hamilton, and the fact that it is just such a frightening project going on that is just destroying the hillside, causing public safety issues, and there doesn't, in terms of flooding on the roadway and runoff. And I may be wrong about this, but I've not seen any proactive or reactive even action on the town. I see more lots being developed, and I don't, that's not true. Okay, so when I drive by there, I see additional of the same 9 original lots. I see development continuing along that road. And I just wonder what the town is doing. What power does the town have to perhaps put a halt onto this until some really protective mechanism is in place? And I know that the planning board is working on the stormwater management, but it's more than that. I look at one of those housing units that has literally taken off the entire hillside, and it's frightening to think what's going to happen. So things like that, we certainly allow housing, but it has to be reasonable. And where is the town's responsibility and obligation to protect the public safety?
We're going to take one more housing comment, and then because it's 20 minutes to 3. Yes. Did you want to say something, either?
Yeah, it's kind of housing. So wait, what was I going to say? Yeah. So I don't want to sound like I actually am very in favor of having, a more affordable housing. I think it will be good for the kids in this town to see that kind of diversity in a lot of ways. So I don't want to sound like I am against it at all, but I do want to say that do we need to move a school and change the microenvironment of our entire community to do that? I just want to throw it out there as a question and something to think about.
Okay, thank you. Tyler, I want to switch to economic development. The 10%? You have to have the zoning in place by December 2024. 2024. Yes. We have to have the zoning in place by December 2024. So that, as Patrick said, the town is still trying to work on kind of what the area would be for the zoning district. There's a consultant on board ready to help write the zoning. But it's sort of like the area comes first because you really have to get that anchored down. So I think there's continued discussion going on about that. All right, economic development. The goal that's been selected is support the town's existing business community by making downtown Hamilton more welcoming, more aesthetic, and more accessible while encouraging commercial growth in appropriate locations across town by providing resources and support for local businesses. What steps do you think the town could take to help address this goal? Everybody's beat after talking about housing. Should have taken that last. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, everybody thinks that everything can happen in the downtown, holy mackerel. And so my thought is there's a lot of space farther out that could be rezoned for, maybe we won't be making car tires and things like that, but it seems like there could be an extension of a business area outside of the downtown, and I would like to see that incorporated into zoning.
Okay, thank you. Jack, I knew you were going to have something to say about this. That's all right. Stop it, Rick. You didn't all hear that comment.
Yeah. RKG, during the course of the master plan process, went through an exercise of saying, how are we going to deal with our taxes? We have the highest taxes of all of our peer. We're the second highest taxes of all of our peer group of towns around here. Wenham is the first. And the only way we can effectively deal with that, every other town around here has commercial development, maybe you might even call it industrial development, that will pay 25 times more toward the tax base than any kind of residential housing. That was RKG's assessment of the situation. And the hope was that Gordon Conwell would integrate somehow into that in a manner that was not going to clog our roads with traffic, that was not going to look more like biolabs than it will like the Cummins Center, or not. The Cummins Center is pretty nice these days, but the basic industrial park is not something we're looking for. We're looking for something we don't have to look at. We're looking at something that's well screened. We're looking at something that's clean. And of course, what I love is 3D printing, but I don't know whether it's going to happen. But if we don't do something like that, we're going nowhere. And we need the money.
Other comments? Anybody? Yes, Rick.
I know. Downtown septic, that's the only way there's going to be further economic development in the downtown. Currently, Winthrop site is outside the commercial district, but that could become a part of the commercial district and downtown. So that's what limits any kind of further economic growth in the downtown.
Okay, other comments on economic development? Anybody? Yes, come over here and then I'll get to you.
Right. With respect to the Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, the planning board has been considering that property for quite some time, since I think last October, so for almost a year. And so we have an overlay district in draft form, and it does provide for commercial development. And at one of our last planning board meetings, however, Ken Barnes from Gordon Conwell Theological Development indicated that, I quote, "the market has spoken," and that essentially the interest in that property has been for residential development. So, and I can also add that the abutters have been very vocal with respect to the planning board's draft overlay district. So I think that the Gordon Conwell seminary property is unique, but if we were to think about commercial development outside of the downtown area, assuming there were to be a parcel available, that it might generate a considerable opposition from abutters.
Thank you. Did you want to address this, or anybody over here? Just quick comment, and we're going to move on.
Just a quick comment about the downtown. I concur that I think Gordon Conwell would be a great opportunity for some commercial development. I think to Rick's point, that septic is not the only issue downtown. We have very limited flow-through of traffic, and I think that's important. If you look at just what the Winthrop School generates every morning and every afternoon, I think that we can't just think about one issue. It's not just septic. It's the width of the streets. It's just the physical capability of the roads to enlarge, and it just isn't there. So that's why I would encourage us to think outside of the downtown.
Okay. So Tyler, when you finish writing that, I'm going to take on another goal just because in the interest of time. I think we should maybe move on. Why don't we look at transportation? Yeah. You all right with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So your transportation goal is to ensure safe, high-quality, and sustainable transit in Hamilton by maintaining the town's existing transportation infrastructure while creating convenient non-automobile connections between points of interest. Thoughts, actions the town could take. Yes, Rick.
Well, I'm going to sort of echo what Rosie said, is it needs capital investment in making the downtown a safe, pedestrian-safe, and welcoming environment that certainly would go a long way to encouraging economic development and helping with the transportation issues downtown. So that, that's something that the HDC and the planning board are looking at.
Okay, thank you. Other comments on the transportation goal? Anybody? Yes.
So I think this is probably where I should have mentioned my concern about bicycle lanes and lack thereof on some of the main thoroughfares, and perhaps something online that would be a route for bicyclists, because it is treacherous and I would like to see people get safely to and from. So that's.
Good point. Did you, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Adding to that, just maybe understanding our traffic flows better. My kids go to the community house, and when I'm picking them up and the train is going there, that corner is about as terrifying as it gets. It's right up there. So just understanding how our flows are working now and what we might be able to do to sort of encourage people to go other ways. To just think about what's safer for our family. We've got a lot of things there. We've got the school, we've got Patton Park, we've got, you know, the commerce further down. We love walking from Crosby's to Patton Park or Honeycomb to Patton Park, and it's all can get a little dicey. So just thinking about traffic patterns, I think.
Thank you. Yep, one more comment on this, or maybe two.
Yeah, real quick. The other intersection that poses a real challenge is Walnut and Bay Road. And so just having the MBTA, the commuter rail train, go through it all makes it an incredible challenge. But those two intersections at some point, if we have any new development, need a good look.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, regarding the transportation and Route 1A, I think it would be really important for the community to actually study 1A from Wenham right to Ipswich. and do an analysis on that. I know it's another study, but this is an important one because I think in a couple of situations, there are some hazardous areas because Asbury is another terrible intersection. And I think redoing the town center, this is an opportunity again to make that right. And you can do it with Patton Park there, with that intersection, the community building, and the Winthrop School site on the opposite side. You can do something really interesting in that area. But by doing that study on the 1A, you can actually, because we were talking about economic development down the line, some communities have developed nodes along highways that are really interesting projects. They're very controlled in size, but they introduce good economic development in areas that where you can really afford to do it without losing, again, the character of your site. That's why more planning is better than less. And if the town goes forward with this, they can really come up with more economic opportunities that tie into transportation. It ties into other things as well.
A good example of a town that's done that is Groton.
Yeah.
Yeah, nodes,
Yeah.
commercial nodes, all up around 119 to 225. Yep,
It's a good way to do it, actually.
it is. Any other thoughts before I take you to community facilities and services so we can get back to land use before we wrap up today? Yes.
Just keep in mind that an awful lot of our roads are scenic ways. 1A is an absolute nightmare for bicycles. I was on it yesterday on my bicycle, and I swear every time I do it, I'll never do it again. So a lot of roads simply are not expandable. That's the problem. And we're going to have to do a lot of planning to find out where those possibilities do exist.
Thank you. All right. I understand, but we're just going to do the best we can. Community facilities and then back to land use. And then you guys can go because it's too beautiful out. I don't know. We're so entertaining here. It's like, so the community facilities goal is to provide high quality public facilities and schools by engaging in preventive maintenance and renovations, improve Hamilton's capacity to provide community services, including through increased regionalization, and provide excellent public utilities can meet the long-term needs of the community. Can you say more?
Another cell tower, you mean?
Internet service.
Is it bad here? I don't know, I'm just asking. No, I just don't live here, so. You know, it's really funny to hear you say this because I live on the South Shore, and there are places along Route 3 where you used to always be able to talk to people, and now the calls drop. And I'm thinking, I guess so. Okay, so let me get over there, and then I'll get to you. No, it's all right. You can talk. Just wait a sec.
No, this is a question. Could you explain the second bullet point and how that gets in?
So, Rick, I'm going to ask you to pretend those bullets aren't there.
Oh,
Okay? We're going to focus on the goal. We're just going to focus on the goal. Yes. It's totally fine. Focus on the goal.
Tax base.
Oh, the tax, you mean expanding the tax base in order to do this? Okay.
So 80%.
I'm sorry, you need the mic.
So 80% of our community services are regionalized now. We're probably one of the most regionalized towns in the state. So other than fire and police, there's not much left. And then you'd have to create a separate new entity, independent entity for fire and police. It would be like a regional school system. So I'm not sure that's viable, but anyway.
Okay. Well, nonetheless, this is the goal, and we want to get some input from you. Oh, hey, you have been so quiet. There you go.
I have intentionally because I'm listening and learning, so I appreciate it. I do think there's opportunity for regionalization, although we do, as you commented in the opening remarks, a lot with our friends in Wenham. But, you know, you talk police, fire, we talk DPW, shared assets, equipment, large, you know, bucket trucks or backhoes, things of that nature which are used, and you could plan time and utilize them. We've played around with sharing a gas facility with them, but everybody wants their own, and that becomes a struggle. But I do think this is an area, and you mentioned taxes, that there's a large opportunity, you know, to get better services by sharing it with Wenham or other communities. I keep saying Wenham, but I do think there's an opportunity. As for the cell towers, the town is very actively involved in that. Patrick and I have been, you know, working with a tower company. They recently put the site up behind Town Hall, and that was a struggle. And I will tell you, I had discussions with the owner of that company, and they're really not excited to come back because of the opposition in the community. And then you do deal with the carriers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and such, who, you know, they're a business, they're a profit business, right? They want to make money, and, you know, they don't typically go in areas where they're not going to get a return on that asset. But, you know, Hamilton is an area that they want to be. You know, they slowed down at the end of this fourth quarter here for 23, but they're coming back next year, and we have an opportunity. And I do think we need another tower or some type of transmission facility somewhere downtown, because that is a hole right now. So that's on our list, and we're working on it and having active discussions. So.
Thank you.
The other thing that really jumps out at me that is regional, but I don't know how the town instigates this or what they can do, but we need news coverage. Rosie should know what's going on Bridge Street. People should know what's going on with the turf fields. People should know these things and have these discussions. I spoke up at town meeting. The information that I had that I tried to get out was not generally available until many months later, many weeks later, and then there was sort of, oh, no one told me. I can't tell you how many times important issues are dealt with this way in the town. I had no idea. Or, you know, in any case, Ipswich has a great news service, of course. We had Bill Wasserman to thank for that, who's no longer around, but I think it's critical.
And that is a goal of the town manager, to better, you know, communication vehicles. I do think the town manager's report that he does is good. Independent report. And Eric Tracy, our superintendent of schools, he does ones equally as well. So, but
Yeah.
That's why it's a goal. There needs to be.
Yeah. So quickly, yes.
So I think there is something very concrete in the works, because absolutely we need independent journalism. And I think the turf fields was a perfect example of that, right? We want the turf fields, but we as a community didn't look at the hazards. And now there's been a study come out through the VA system that actually ties the PFAS in turf fields to testicular cancer. And that wasn't completed at the time. But there is something in the works. And I think Jack Lawrence might know a little bit about that.
Bring back the chronicle.
Quickly. Yes, because we're going to go back to land use.
Bill Wasserman, who anybody who doesn't know Bill Wasserman, he used to be the guy who published the Chronicle and everything else. He had printer's ink in his blood. He was a fantastic guy, and at the age of 94 was walking up and down the street in Ipswich signing up advertising for the Ipswich Local News. A group of us have been talking to the Ipswich Local News for now way too long, but we're almost finalized to have the 501c3 status complete. And we are going to work under their umbrella to get economies of scale. It will be a nonprofit newspaper. It will come to everybody's mailbox the same way Ipswich Local News works. And we're going to have our own reporters, but we will be working with them, but we will have our own reporters who will go to all the committee meetings and will work with the schools. We've talked to Eric about it. We're going to integrate with his journalism course in the high school. And I think hopefully we hope to have their first editions out by the end of the year. It's taken way too long. It's driving me crazy. I'm a private sector guy, and this public sector stuff just drives me nuts. But I think we're there. We're way down the road on this thing. And it will be reliant, because it is nonprofit, on private donations. We've got about 2/3 of the money raised for the first 2 years to make sure that this thing's not going to crater in the first 2 years. And hopefully the ad buildup will start to build up accordingly and pick up some of the slack. But you'll see, as is in the Ipswich Local News in every issue, requests for donations. So I hope everybody's feeling generous along those lines. And we'll see how that all goes together. If I could just hit one other thing on facilities, and that's our water supply. As you know, we're restricted every summer. I don't know if everybody is aware that at the moment the water system is in the process of being studied for regionalization. And there was supposed to have been an engineering study completed. The first engineering studies were completed, which would bring a pipe down from Salem Beverly Water Board. The quid pro quo for them is that they will get a new plant to process their water. They have 3 reservoirs that could take care of us right now. There is a pipe, but when I can't use that pipe, it's too small. So what the plan right now is to bring a pipe down from Beverly Salem Water Board to Hamilton, which will then go out to the other 4 communities downriver. And ultimately, it will go through Salem, which will go to the MWRA, and that Quabbin will become our backup supply, which we need to have and are now looking at a $10 million cost to produce for forest fire containment. We have our needs, our regular needs covered, but they want us to have extra tankage, which would cost us, as I say, about $10 million for forest fires, for emergencies, for things of that nature. So we were supposed to have another engineering study, and perhaps Bill knows what the status of that was. It was supposed to be completed by August, and I don't know where it stands at the moment because the head of the Ipswich River Watershed Association has been on leave. One of his parents died. I can just further state that Ipswich River water, because of the high organic content, is the most expensive stuff to process that you could possibly imagine. So the sooner we get off of Ipswich River as our source and let it go back to becoming a recreation resource, which is where it's much better used, the better off we'll be.
Okay, thank you. All right, given the time, I'm not going to take any more comments on community facilities right now. Thank you, Jack. I want to just go back to land use goal. Just remind everybody and see if you have any additional thoughts about this in light of the previous discussion. Adopt land use regulations that promote responsible commercial and residential development while protecting the town's open spaces, natural landscapes, and built environment by prioritizing redevelopment. Actions you think the town could take. Because bear in mind, that's what this master plan is. It's about the town of Hamilton. What can the town do? You're all very quiet. Shh.
Julie, you have somewhere there rezoning for denser development.
Is that a suggestion? Well, we might, but here's the goal, and it might, that might be one of the things the town could do. And that may show up under another goal, which is fine. Did you want to, I wasn't sure, someone was.
Yeah, I'd just say one thing. The land use goal, I think, for the town, a town really has 3 tools to work with. It has the environment, it has economic development, and it has the social aspect, social needs. And I think what's important for the town with those 3 tools is to balance them correctly so you don't overemphasize economic development, you don't overemphasize preservation of the environment, that you have to, in making all decisions, kind of deal with those 3 and try to balance them out to come to the right decision. So that's all.
Yeah, that balancing is key, and I think that actually is one of the hardest things for towns to do. Yes.
Yeah, in that vein, without stating the obvious, adapting regulations that promote whatever these towns' goals are. I feel like we could talk about all these issues for a long time. 2 hours is not enough, but if we decide as a community that again, residential land is what we want, not having regulations that are going to restrict that. If we're going to have commercial use, not putting up fights for how we do commercial zoning. It just feels that sometimes we say one thing and the regulations require us to do another. And I think we need to be really thoughtful about what we're doing and what our goals actually are.
Agreed. Any other thoughts about this one before we bring this to a close? To write a true form-based code, you need someone who knows what it is.
Right. Right.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to amend that goal to reflect sustainable redevelopment consistent with town character.
Okay, so we can take that up with the master plan committee.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Did you want to say something else? Or not? You're looking at me. I'm thinking you must have something more to add.
No, I don't know if Bill wants an answer to that. But,
I mean, when I first got into this field, Bob Lemire, who was in Lincoln at the time, wrote a really interesting book about creative land development. So that's how I'm really old, to tell you, if I can even remember Bob Lemire. And Bob used to say to his students in graduate school, save what needs to be saved and build what needs to be built. And he said that long before we had the concept of balancing economic, environmental, and social issues, characteristics in the community. And I think one of the great struggles for towns like yours is the ease with which people can identify resource protection actions that matter to you, and the challenge in identifying development actions. And that was a challenge 20 years ago, and I think it still is. Form-based code is a tool for creating kind of predictable development. It is typically done with a design team, but I mean, different people approach it differently. But the point of having predictable development is you have a code that says, here's what you can do. Here's the different building forms, here's the density, this is what you can do. And if you do this, you're going to get an as-of-right approval, and it's going to be speedy. So, to some people, that's a great thing to do because now we all know what's going to happen in downtown Hamilton, or now we all know what's going to happen in some other district. And the first time a project comes through, which just happened in Northampton, people go, oh my God, is that what we did? We actually are allowing development. Yeah, it is. It's slowly dying. So you have to just trust my yelling, okay? My kids always said I could yell fast. But the point is just the more predictable you make the development process, the more likely it is that you're going to get change because you have facilitated it. And that's the crux of the matter, is how able are you to accommodate change to address all these other things you said, while at the same time protecting, providing, you got to grow. All three are true. Yeah, this is dead, so.
yeah, just one last comment on.
It's dead for you.
You gotta yell into it. The idea is actually creating a language that people understand. When you're dealing with matters like zoning, it's arcane. Nobody really understands the subtleties of land use planning. You really don't. And even people who are in it don't really understand what they're doing in a lot of cases. But you create a language, and that language is something that I touched on a little bit about community character. That's something that everybody understands. Everybody knows what they like about this town, but they don't recognize why it looks the way it does. And they don't understand that it's not a collection of houses and streets and buildings and other lanterns on the street. It's really the combination that come together that forms a unique setting that really is a very evocative in a way that people will gravitate and they want to spend time there and love the place. And it's a very subtle thing, and that's what you can take into account in a form-based when you have good people working for you. They understand a lot of that aspect, and they can create that as a proactive study, and that's the whole importance of a form base. And developers love it because it's as of right. They don't go through these processes.
Right. But then you have to accept when you've adopted it
Yeah,
that
that-
you are going to be ushering in change.
I just want to reflect on the fact that I've come to a number of these meetings, and I think it's the first time that folks with young children have been here. And it really brought to mind, we talk about diversity and planning for diversity, whether the groups that are set up, a committee to, look at this, that, or the other thing, whether people are very conscientious about breaking up their thought process and the planning process to consider various age groups with very different kinds of needs for space. And I really would like that to go in if it's not already in. We've got seniors, we've got people with young kids, we've got people with teenagers, my goodness, who thinks about them? Not enough. Well, I've had them. They actually weren't too bad.
We're lucky. Mine were a different story.
But I think that should get built into the planning process. It's also possible, you talk about neighborhood or town character. Town character varies quite a bit around town. I'm constantly jealous by the folks I know who live right downtown by the library in that wildly wonderful, warm neighborhood that they've got going on there. Woohoo! But other neighborhoods have different kinds of character and different kinds of needs and gaps. So I think it would be good to have a kind of a neighborhood reflection as well as age group.
Agreed. I think where it's past 3 o'clock, and you guys were told this.
There's a lot of stuff coming our way, right? So I think we've got to set goals and principles and guidelines in play now. That we just can't, wait until it hits us. We should start planning before someone plans it for us. But thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all your time, and I hope you have a great rest of the weekend. Oh, yeah, the master plan committee's done a ton of work. Oh, thank you. Yeah, they've done a great job.